we do. So disclaimer, the comment section is locked, yes, but there's a 99.9% chance that as long as your comment is not racist, sexist, just plain hatred or some form of that, your comment will be approved anyway. So even if you disagree with me, your comment will pretty much probably go through as long as it's not hatred, even if it's critique or disagreement. It's fine. So that disclaimer over. Another disclaimer that I think I should go into is that I do not work for Riot when I'm saying what I'm about to say. For if I did, I would be hoping I would at least be able to make enough money to have a weekly pizza, for Pete's sake. I also don't work for you, as far as I know, or else the same thing should be true. I just really like pizza. So, without further ado, moving on into the topic at hand, why this video is called what this video is. Worlds Season 5 happened back in October, and we saw, I believe it was around 76 different champions in this game played. I believe the total count was around or down towards like 125. So that means that if a game with 125 champions, a good 75 plus of them were played in some capacity. But then I saw articles both during and then after Worlds that didn't really criticize Riot's idea of diversity, but it made me think that perhaps what Riot's idea of diversity and then what everybody else's idea of diversity are also two different things. And I'm going to explain what I mean by this. And this isn't like a knock at any of those articles that came out that were maybe even dissecting Riot's diversity or maybe saying Riot, the diversity thing was not true. I actually think those articles were great, as a matter of fact. But I also think those are examples also of maybe might be a difference in opinion of what exactly diversity is. See, from Riot's point of view, they have a game that has over 120 plus champions right now. There is no meta or no way to balance all of them, that they're all viable all the time. It might be nice, especially if you're one of those people that main York or something like that, something that you really don't see ever. It would be nice, obviously, if your champion was probably more viable more of the time, but there's probably no world where that really happens. Just because there's always a meta shift, new items come out, a new champion comes out, a rework, something that synergizes as well with the item, makes that champion just OP. There's always just so many things changing now. This game is so big when it comes to this champion pool that there's no way diversity could mean for them all 100, I think it's up to now 29 champions, are actually viable in this game. That just cannot happen. Of course, I don't want to jinx anything. Maybe it can happen. We're only into Season 6. If this lasts another 10 years and we're into Season 16 and that does happen, I can eat crow. But my point is, so their idea of diversity is just getting to a point where as many champions as possible could be played. And I think even that encompasses a cheese pick or a team comp that might favor a champion that might not be favored otherwise. Most notably I can think of is Kog'Maw. Now I know in 6.3, especially there's some Rageblade madness going on at the time of this, I'm recording this video. And on top of that, Kog'Maw hasn't necessarily always been considered bad, but I know in the preseason after his changes, a lot of people consider him trash. But even so we just go with the more immobile hyper carries, for example. So we go Kog'Maw, Jinx, even Tristana to a sense, even though she's not immobile, how the fact that a Jugger Trist might be made, even a Jugger Vayne, even though she has a lot of mobility, especially moving towards an enemy champion. Goals encompass that maybe, Jinx, for example, isn't always going to be a power pick. No one's really ever, even during the height of the tank meta, Jinx wasn't really ever banned or contested, so to speak, unless you were playing against a Jinx player, maybe you were playing against Def and you wanted to try and contest that. But at the same time, if you go and make a Jugger Jinx-esque comp, suddenly that's where you can play her the strongest. As a matter of fact, at the time that I'm recording this video, speaking of Season 6, who another champion that's kind of considered bad is Jinx, as a matter of fact, Def just played her in the LPL, and in Game 2 versus LDG got a pentakill. So I mean, that's another thing I think that kind of plays into this a little bit, only a tiny bit, but I figured I might as well mention it, because in the conversations I've had about this, all these different points come up and I'm going to try and narrow them and keep this video under 10 minutes. But there's that too, right? Then there's certain players who, yeah, maybe they can play Kalista, or they at the time when Silver was big, Silver, Corki and stuff, but then there's those people like Imp, maybe who could pull out the Twitch, and then they make a team comp that makes Twitch suddenly viable for that player, Imp in particular, or with Def, Jinx in particular. That is a version of diversity that I think kind of just goes into this juggling of what diversity actually is. And I think for Riot, when they're trying to again balance this game, I don't think cheese is off the table as well. And that's another point. Like, support brand was played and it was considered cheese if they only knew when Season 6 started. Oh my goodness. Anyway, if that is considered like a cheese pick, it was the same time with a goal, right? You saw the support brand and there was a goal, especially with the zombie skin, that whole, controversy about he raises his arm when there's like an enemy in a bush or whatever. But here what I mean is, one of the most notable things I can do was maybe Keen when he played in Gravity, and like he would pull out the Urgot. Urgot was considered like you'd never see Urgot, and like Urgot gets locked in. Oh my goodness, this is cheese, and then suddenly it works, and suddenly Urgot is like viable to an extent, where you see him played mid a lot of places, or in Korea you saw him played more in the AD carry role, but stuff like that. Suddenly bringing a champion off like the never gonna be seen, bench, and then suddenly into the meta as like an anti-assassin, because like assassins were being played. And that's my point. The reason I bring that up is to touch to the point about the meta always changing, right? Like at that point in time, I believe Zed was like almost contested, if not one of the power picks in mid lane, along with like LeBlanc, I believe. This was before MSI, I want to say. And I want to say, so Cho'Gath was on his way in, but he wasn't in yet. And so King pulled out the Urgot pick though, and it was as a Zed counter. It wasn't just like, you know what, I don't have an idea what I'm going to play, let me just play Urgot mid. I mean, it might have been. It was Keen after all. He actually asked if he should like Twitter poll people to see just what you guys decide what I'm going to pick or something like that, right? But at the same time, that was because of the way the meta was. It suddenly made Urgot viable mid as an anti-assassin. And then Cho'Gath came in, because Cho'Gath is thought to be, as in Riot's terms anyway, another anti-assassin. And it was a way to go against these assassins that were somewhat dominant in the mid lane at the time. During early spring of Season 5. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that that's considered cheese, right? But at the same time, it was because of the way the meta was that was apparently like a good piece of cheese because it worked and then it kind of spread out a bit. And I don't want to, again, discredit those articles that were like, I don't want to say picking at Riot's definition of diversity. I just think they had like a different view of what diversity was. Diversity, and one article I read, for example, was more explaining about a lot of champions being viable at all times. And I think they're not wrong that that could be a thing one day. Of course, I'm not an expert at this, so I'm just spouting my opinions after, thinking and talking about this after a while. And of course, that could come at a time. There could be a time where every champion is viable. Like, I don't really know, to be honest. But I just don't think, especially with the champions growing, like once we broke 100 especially, I don't know if that could be a possibility. I just don't know. I'm not saying it can't happen, I just don't know. I'm just going to say that. I'm going to stick my neck out there and say it would be extremely rare, I think, to see that, just because with so many different champions and so many different roles even, there's always going to be power picks. There's always going to be something that's better or just more powerful than some other stuff. And I know with these changes with the classes, like the Juggernaut changes and like the AD carry changes, they're trying to make it so that you want to pick a champion not because they're just stronger than the other champions, but because you want that champion in your comp, kind of like what Sivir already does. Because like Graves and Lucian, for example, was a big example of what they would mention when they'd say this, how Graves and Lucian used to have anyway, similar playstyle. And what they wanted was, you want to pick Graves because you want Graves, or you want to pick Lucian because you want Lucian. Not because, okay, Graves was nerfed and Lucian's strongest right now, or, Lucian was nerfed and Graves is strongest right now. Same when the tank meta happened, where it was like, okay, we don't really want to play Kog'Maw into like all these tanks, and you saw Jinx actually, even in Korea, start to get picked up quite a bit. And then Jinx got like nerfed twice in 3 patches, and you saw people go to Vayne, because Vayne was the one that hadn't been nerfed yet. And they wanted to change that, and they wanted to make it so that all these champions could possibly be viable if you made a comp that needs them. So with that said, they're going forward, they're having this mage, they're doing like what they did to 80 carries, they're doing it to the mages, at least 6 of them majorly. And about the middle of the year, so I want to say, I believe the schedule said about June. But who knows, when they keep going class by class and do it, maybe all these champions will be viable, and maybe then the diversity could meet the standards of some of these articles. Like I said, I want to discredit these articles. In my opinion, they were even good articles. I just think the ideology of what diversity means for Riot in a game where they have so much that they have to try and balance, that a lot of people complain about that they can't balance anyway, whether they do a good job or not. And that's not to say they're like bad at balance or good at balance. It's just to say, no matter what they do, people are going to say like something sucks anyway. I mean, when you kind of pretty much have no coming at you before you even open your mouth, that, I'm not saying that's an influence or anything like that, but I am saying that does happen. Don't act like there aren't people that you have seen or maybe even know that just like as soon as something's like broken, all of Riot can't balance it, nothing. I just think going forward that word in particular just has multiple definitions depending on who you ask and who you look towards. I think Riot is more about making sure that a champion could be picked, even if only once, for a specific comp, or for something like cheese to potentially mold the meta even, or just because it was just cheese for that one game. And the reason that counts, why that brand game counts, is because with so many champions in the game can't be played, might not be viable because they're just not powerful or whatever, the fact that there was a point or a moment or a game where you could play a champion means that maybe the meta is moving in a direction, or like just balance in general is moving in a direction where if a champion see the spotlight or like, you know, sunshine once, maybe we can work it from there to make them be able to actually be viable forever or something, right? While with some of these articles, it was kind of like, I feel like these articles were saying this is a place where if Riot got to, then their definition of diversity would pretty much change to what their definition of diversity was. Which would pretty much, again, being on to like the point I was talking about mains and stuff. So this video, I was hoping to help just kind of clarify the difference in diversity between Riot Games and pretty much everybody else. Especially with when the word came up so much, because that was like the theme of Season 5. Seeing all the different, like, in my opinion, interesting. There were like disagreements, but there were still interesting conversations about what diversity means for this game that has so much in it now. So, I mean, it'll be interesting seeing going forward how this works out. I'm not going to say Riot can, you know, balance all 130 champions and make them all viable. Like I just said, you know, Def just put out Jinx, who's considered one of the worst AD carries right now in Season 6, and just got a pentakill, so they're doing something right. And in particular, it was kind of a Protect the Jinx-esque comp, even though they had Zed for the split push. So, I mean, that can be broken down by like smarter analysis and stuff like Monte Cristo or somebody. They could probably look at that game like a VOD review and actually break down what actually set up something like that. It could have just been LGG playing bad for all I know. I just saw Jinx being played and I'm biased and that's the greatest champion in the game, so I'm okay with it either way. Now, that's pretty much it for this video. I don't know when the next video is going to be because life is full of a lot of kinks. But until next time, take care. GG, get jinxed.